Hi there, it's Mr. Clark. Welcome to lesson MED.4.1, where we begin our study on medieval rhythmic notation. This is an area where there is a lot of scholarly work, a lot of study. It is complicated, and it changes from era to era, so we'll take a look at how rhythmic notation develops throughout the medieval period. And in this first section, medieval.4.1, we will be looking at modal rhythm. Early manuscripts that we looked at didn't have any sort of rhythmic notation. They were more concerned with pitch. However, once you start to write polyphonic music, where there are multiple voices that occur simultaneously doing different things, you need to have some sort of rhythmic notation so that you know how the lines line up with each other. So one of the first systems that they used was known as modal rhythm, from about 1175 to 1225, where how notes were grouped in ligatures, in either groups of 2 or 3, indicated a specific rhythm. Modal rhythm recognized 2 lengths of notes, the longa and the brevis, or long and short notes. The longa typically received the beat, and scholars think that the music was typically performed with the beat being around 80 beats per minute. So da, 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 would be the longa. So, the sources from the 1200s give us a list of 6 rhythmic modes. And we'll get to how the ligatures look later, but the 6 modes are these. So the first mode, you have a longa and then a brev. So in modern notation, we write da 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 da, where you have a longer note and then a shorter note. Rhythmic mode 2 reverses that. Ba-ba, 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 ba-ba. Here we have long and then 2 brevs. Da 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 da. 2 brevs and a long. Ba-ba, ba, ba-ba, ba. So again, it's kind of swapping out mode 3, same as mode 1 and 2 were kind of reversed of each other. 5 is all longs, ba, 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 ba. And 6 is all brevs, ba, 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 ba. So all of these modes are in compound meter. Mode 1 we see most frequently. This was likely the earliest mode to develop, and then that would establish compound meter for when these other modes were developed. Modes 4 and 6 don't usually appear in the music that we see. It's likely that scholars were like, well, 1 and 2 are like related, so like 3 and 4 should probably be, a pair, and 5 and 6 should be a pair. So there might be some theoretical work that isn't really substantiated by the extant music. You might also notice that not all longas and brevs are the same length. So here, the long is a quarter note, brev is an eighth note. Here, the long is a dotted quarter note, a brev is an eighth note, and then it's also a quarter note. Both of the brevs are still shorter than the longa, but it's, yeah. So a couple other things that are worth noting. If you have a longa that's worth 3 brevs, like here, and here, and here, that was considered to be perfect. That's because the Christians were naming them, and they really, 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 really like the number 3, because of the Holy Trinity being God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. I cannot emphasize how much they like the number 3. So these were known as perfect. And then if you had a longa that was worth 2 brevs, that's typo, like here where it's quarter note, that was considered to be imperfect. Sometimes you have to double the length of a brev to fit in the meter, so it's in compound meter, and they didn't want to go da, 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 da. They didn't want to go into a 5/8 sort of feel, so they would alter the last brev to make it a little bit longer to fit in the meter. This was known as alteration. I've chosen to notate in 6/8. This is the length of a single pattern in modes 3, 4, and not quite. Well, I guess, yeah, 5, because 2 longs. For modes 1, 2, and 6, 2 patterns fit in a bar, but in practice, the measures are often paired anyway, and it's easier to read 6/8 than 3/8. And moving forwards, we'll see that rhythmic values slowly change which one gets the beat. Smaller and smaller notes start to get the beat. And there's no modern notation for what the longa would be if we went with literal note values. So what I will do and what scholars often do is, we know the longa got the beat. In 6/8 in modern notation, the dotted quarter gets the beat, so that's what we go with here. So in these clearly defined modes, there's no ambiguity, but there's a lot of context that makes a difference, and we'll look at it in the next section. One other thing to note that scholars write about is the number of times a rhythmic mode repeats before a rest, which is known as its ordo. So the length of the rest is determined by the mode, whatever is required to fill out the beat. So here we have the primus ordo, just one, ba, 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 and you'll note that it ends with an extra note, ba, 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 ba. So again, ba, ba, ba is your strict pattern, and then we add that extra note on the end, ba, 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 ba. Here we add two extra notes on the end, but it fills the beat, ba, 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 and ba, 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 ba. If you add another iteration of the pattern, that becomes secundus ordo, and then tertius ordo, or tertius ordo, probably in ecclesiastic Latin. In modern notation, obviously, a note shape determines its rhythm. In modal rhythmic notation, the way we indicated which mode we were in is by ligatures. And specifically, if you start with a ligature of 3 notes, 1, 2, 3, and then you have groups of 2 after that, we're in mode 1. So that would be ba, 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 ba. Or on pitches, we're starting ba, 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 ba. Fascinating. If you start with 2s and then you end with a 3, that's going to be the reverse. That makes sense. Ba, 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 ba. If you start with a single note and then follow it with 3s, we're in mode 3. So that would be ba, 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 ba. 4, we're going to reverse that. We start with 3s and end with a single. So that would be ba, 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 ba. If you have all 3s, we're going to be in mode 5. Ba, 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 ba. I missed the pitch there. Ba, 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 ba. If you start with a group of 4, we're going to be in mode 6. Ba, 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 ba. So, we're going to take a look at some examples of modal rhythm, and we will see you next time.